And good morning, Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio, 103, well, I was going to say 103.57. I don't know what I'm thinking. It must be the guest in with me, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. KIDO Talk Radio, Phil Hardy joining us. Phil, good to have you with us.
Always a pleasure, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
So here we are. A happy new year to you and to your family.
Happy New Year.
It's been a wild 2 years in Washington for you, working for Strategies 360, getting a lot done. But now Washington changes. Can you give us a little history of the last 2 years with a Republican House, Republican Senate, and how it's going to be different?
Well, clearly it's going to be different because we no longer have control over both bodies in Congress. Now, we really barely had control over both bodies in Congress before because the Republican Party is really quite fractured, as we all know. The Freedom Caucus, who I actually do respect a lot of the principles by which it stands upon, forced the Republican Party to constantly need to call up Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer and say we need some votes to pass key pieces of legislation, which means a lot of the Republican agenda was compromised to begin with. So what are we looking at now? We have Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer and Anastasia Ocasio-Cortez, 29-year-old woman from Queens, New York, running the House of Representatives. Now, I really mention the latter's name most significantly because she's going to be in this new role. The Democrats have this very, very literally socialist wing of their party that's been elected with all of these new 63 freshmen. I think what we're going to start seeing, and this is really ironic, is the leadership of the Democrats in the House of Representatives calling up the Republican minority and saying, hey, we need some votes to get some things passed, because I don't think the Democrats are going to have the votes on their own. We're really looking at, I believe, a return to what we had in 2011 when the Republicans first took control of the House. The Democrats still had the Senate and the presidency, except now it's going to be the Democrats in control of the House, the Republicans in control of the Senate, and the Republicans, obviously, and President Trump controlling the White House. I think it's going to be a lot of gridlock. And frankly, you know, for the inside the Beltway people that I associate with, the writers from the Washington Post and whatnot, you know, they think that a Congress that doesn't pass a lot of bills, doesn't pass a lot of laws, is a bad Congress. I think we in the West and we in Idaho understand that a Congress that does the least is doing the least bad. So I'm not so upset about them not being able to pass a bunch of new laws. And let's be clear, Nancy Pelosi and her Democrat friends are not going to get a lot done in Congress.
Well, there we have it, our great friend Phil Hardy. So which party self-implodes first, the Republicans or the Democrats?
Well, I think that there is, you know, this is a really interesting question, Kevin. A lot of the more quote-unquote moderate Republicans, or the Republicans who had been there for a long time, have left the body. But by the same token, a lot of the young firebrands have also left, the Raul Labradors. You know, there's a few others that escape my mind at the moment. But there are some significant other people who have been, you know, at the forefront of really challenging Republican orthodoxy, who just got fed up and went home. So it's really a combination of more conservative members and some people who are just, you know, the Mike Simpsons, who are, to most East Coast people, would be very conservative, but in reality is quite pragmatic. So I think that the Democrats are going to have to try and really shore up what they're trying to do in order to get things passed. And then once they get over to the Senate, they're probably dead on arrival. So it's really going to be, to be honest, I think really what we're looking at here is how many more judges we can get put onto courts, because we have control of the Senate, and that's how that works.
Our great friend Phil Hardy joining us, but it's interesting. Do you think we could ever see one day here at KIDO Talk Radio where we're not talking about two political parties, but possibly four, where you have these elements that split off from each other?
Well, we essentially do have four parties at the moment, but it's impossible to get elected with anything but a D or an R next to your name until some sort of seismic thing happened. And frankly, most of your listeners probably don't remember this, but it already almost happened. Ross Perot already tried to start a third party, and he got pretty far by the standards of the day. But it's all gone now. So really, you have people, you know, the pejorative is rhino, and now the D's have their dinos, you know, Democrat in name only. It's just like Bernie Sanders. He couldn't run for president as an independent, so he ran as a Democrat, even though he's not a Democrat. So we do have four parties in Congress. We have the ultra-conservatives, the Freedom Caucus. We have the Democratic Socialists, or the Progressive Caucus. Then we have the Republicans and the Democrats.
Right. It's just fascinating. How do you think Speaker Pelosi is going to run things? Thinking about what happened to the Republicans, considering John Boehner basically got run, Paul Ryan, people are, still mad about Paul Ryan. So you take a look at Madam Pelosi. I mean, most of these cats were run on that she wouldn't be the speaker, and lo and behold, Nancy wins again.
Let's be perfectly clear about one thing. Nancy Pelosi is a master of what she does. She's a master legislator. She's a master parliamentarian. She's a master strategist. I really have to take my hat off to her ability to organize and run and command her caucus. I don't agree with her principles on how she wants to govern, but how she actually can control the unwieldy body that she's been managing to do all these years is truly remarkable. And she will be only, I believe, the second speaker to have been speaker and come back and be speaker again. I think Sam Rayburn, was the only other. He's got buildings named after him in Washington, D.C. So I think she's going to do just fine to a certain extent, but in the end, she's going to have the same things happen, just as you said now, that happened to John Boehner and that happened to Paul Ryan. She's going to become marginalized. She's already said she's only going to serve a maximum of 4 years. I think that by then she'll be 82 years old. There comes a point where you have to ask, why do you even want this when you're 82 years old?
Well, you could say that, but why, Phil? You're in Washington. You see those folks.
I'm not 82.
But you hang out with them. I mean, you see them. We watch them on TV or hear them on the radio. You see these people that, most of us at that age, we're retired, we're hanging out, but these people get in their suits. Look at Orrin Hatch, just retired. A lot of folks. Jesse Helms, Strom Thurmond, they had to wheel him out physically.
He was 103.
Yeah.
I know. So she's a spring chicken at 82 in a couple of years. I don't think she's going to enjoy it as much as she did in the past. When she was speaker last, when they had control of the Senate and had 60 votes, they could get anything they wanted through under President Obama. This is why we're in the situation we are now. They took it too far.
Well, will they take it too far with impeachment? That's one thing we'll talk about with our great friend Phil Hardy joining us. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. That's 107.5 FM, 580 AM. So this is a new experience for you. You're still kind of a newcomer in D.C., although probably doesn't feel like it to you. You came in with the Trump revolution. Now you've got to deal with the libs in the House.
Well, it's not my first go-around in Washington. Obviously, it was there in 2011 with Representative Labrador. But yes, in a nutshell, I have never personally worked in the political arena in the minority. When I worked here in Idaho, we had massive supermajorities in the legislature, and when I went in with Raul, we had the majority in the House. So it's going to be a really unusual experience, not only for me, but for people like Congressman Fulcher, who's already learning he's going to have to make a lot of friends even on the other side of the aisle if he wants to get anything done while he's there. But, to be completely frank, there's been many instances where in the work that I personally do in D.C., we have worked with Democrats, because when you get out west, there are conservative Democrats, and they all face by some of the same things, and they can agree on some issues.
A conservative Democrat.
There are a few.
Now, you're a smart guy, and I'm not being the usual snarky, pithy Kevin Miller here. I have a lot of respect for you, as you may or may not know.
Thank you, Kevin.
I mean, give me an example of a conservative Democrat in the West.
I'm going to tell you right now, Kyrsten Sinema, who just was elected to the United States Senate.
Who?
Kyrsten Sinema.
From?
Arizona. She's replacing Jeff Flake. She's
a conservative, right? Isn't she probably not a social?
She's really rebranded herself. She comes from a very liberal background, but
right.
She only voted with her party 60% of the time.
Like the bait and switch. I promised to be like the people that said they were going to vote against Pelosi, and Pelosi's in. Huh?
No, I think
Can't trust the libs.
It's a little bit different,
Devious little libs.
She's in Arizona. She knows it's a conservative state, and she has picked out certain positions. that are consistent with conservative voters in Arizona. So that is a perfect example of someone who has an excellent staff that we've been able to work with. And frankly, if I can get someone to vote with me 40% of the time that's a Democrat, it's very hard. You wouldn't see most Republicans like Raul Labrador or most any conservative Republican.
Well, you bring up Congressman Labrador's name a lot, former Congressman Labrador a lot.
Former Congressman Labrador. Well, I think it's honorable to refer to them by that,
Congressman.
Yeah, former congressman.
Right.
Yeah.
They always have that title.
They do, and they
Sure.
have privileges that come with it.
Like?
I'm not sure.
But it sounded good.
Well, I think in the Senate they do have floor access. I think in the House they do too.
Yeah, you watch House of Cards when it was good.
Oh, yes.
But anyway, I digress. Phil Hardy joining us here. And we'll get to all your former bosses.
We don't need to do that if we don't want to, but we can.
What do you mean? I just said we would.
Okay, thank you.
Wow. Is this the what you do and you spin people? Is that how that works?
That's part of my job.
I see. Phil Hardy joining us. So what about impeachment? Oh, wait a minute. Before we get to that.
Sure.
You know Donald Trump.
No, I do not. Well, I know him from what we know.
Look, we have creative license in this program.
Okay. Yes, I do.
You know Don. Well, I was talking about Don Jr.
Oh, Don Jr., very nice man.
So how do you think they're handling the craziness?
From everything that we've ever heard, and this goes back years, Trump thrives on having a team of rivals and people who duke it out in front of him. He likes lots of contestants on his show. So I think that this is the way he wants things to be. And I think the next 2 years you're really going to see Trump unchained, whereas the first year was Trump chained. Second year, still in some chains. Now the chains are off. And he's going to proceed the way he goes by his gut. And frankly, I think it hasn't all been proven right, but his gut is generally right. I think he's obviously winning the war against China on trade. We have to let these things run their course. I think that he's going to be as unpredictable as he was in the previous 2 years, but even more so potentially.
All right, our great friend Phil Hardy joining us. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Coming up, we are going to go back to the politics of impeachment because I believe we'll be hearing a lot about that. Also, we'll take your phone calls at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. So everybody's moved out of their offices. Is there just like this breathless anticipation?
Oh, no, it's much more, it's different than that. Everyone's in their offices now. Some offices were scheduled to be repainted and recarpeted, and all the hallways in December, were just filled with all of the furniture. Literally, it looked like you were evacuating the entire building. All the furniture is going back in. It's almost all in place. Most people have hired their staff, the majority of their staff, and they're, had their swearing in receptions, and they're just trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing, waiting for their committee assignments if they haven't got them yet, and some of them have not. And it's chaos. There are votes. But it's going to take a while. It's usually about the end of January before people really figure out what they're supposed to be doing. Not that they know what they're doing, but what they're supposed to be doing.
More with Phil Hardy next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Philip Hardy joining us. We so appreciate him taking the time to just kind of hang out with us and get us a preview of what to expect. So how big a deal will impeachment be?
I take Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer and the leadership of the House at their word that they know that's a loser. There are going to be a lot of young Turks in the House that want to move on impeachment, but they know that there's no way this is really going to get traction, and they might be overreaching their hand. That's not to say that something may not occur where it makes impeachment a more likely event or even a probable event. But the idea that you're going to get a supermajority in the United States Senate to convict, makes going after impeachment in the House really problematic. It'll be a circus. It's a dubious proposition. There's really nothing really on the table that proves that this is necessary, other than people just don't like the president.
Well, tell that to Chuck Todd and others.
Oh, again, about a month ago, middle of December or so, I can't remember, but Chuck Todd was on TV saying the president would be resigning within 2 weeks. Well, he's still here. I think that there's a huge amount of Trump derangement syndrome in D.C. that is flooded out to the rest of the the libs in the country. The president's not going anywhere. I don't even know how far they could get, bar some genuine crime or high crime or misdemeanor as the Constitution says. So I don't see it happening, and I think their polling tells them at the present time that this isn't really what their agenda is. They're supposed to get some, climate change legislation done and some social engineering things organized. That's what the far left wants. Of course, they would like Trump's scalp, but they're not going to get that.
Indeed, our great friend Phil Hardy joining us. Traffic and weather together. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Let's get you to work safely and on time. Good morning, Dave. See, I disagree with you, Phil Hardy. I think that Jerry Nadler and others cannot resist what's going to happen, and they're going to have hearings. You can't tell me that Adam Schiff is going to stand down.
Well, there are going to. No, I didn't say there weren't going to be hearings. There's going to be hearings galore. Because in lieu of getting legislation passed, what can Congress do? It can have hearings. And really, the Republican Party of 2011, 2012 gave the Democrats the blueprint on what to do when you genuinely have no power. And that's you have a ton of hearings. You try to find malfeasance wherever you can. In lieu of any great sin, any small sin will do. And they will have endless hearings about whatever they can come up with. There is a risk, though, when you try to have these hearings and you subpoena these documents, which they will, that there'll be things that they find that they don't like, and then it's going to be a little egg on face. But you're right. There's going to be hearings, and there's going to be a ton of hearings. And that's why you see people like Ryan Zinke, Secretary of the Interior, resigning before, and Scott Pruitt, EPA Administrator, resigning before the new Congress would come in so that they hopefully would face less interrogation by these hearings in Congress.
Right. But, I mean, how in the world can you not think that that's not going to have an impact on the markets and everything else? We already saw that last year.
Well, yes.
The uncertainty.
This is true. Now, I've been having a long-standing argument with a friend of mine, a financier in Boise, actually, mostly via email. I believe that the markets have suffered, greatly for two particular reasons. One, because the Democrats took control of the House in November, and that really, that made the markets really nervous. And two, the Fed has raised interest rates too fast and too much last year. And I think that if the Fed continues to do this, we'll continue to see a disruption in the stock market. It's not about what Trump says or tweets that does this. It's the actions of the Democrats and the Fed. If the Fed raises interest rates again, it's already promised it's going to raise rates twice more this year. If it raises them early this year, you're going to see more turmoil in the market, and it's not good for the market. It's very disappointing, and it's understandable that the president had previously and periodically jokes about firing the Federal Reserve chairman. He appointed him. I don't see why he couldn't fire him.
Well, you have other people like your liberal friends saying, well, he's doing that because the Fed is trying to prove its independence from the commander-in-chief.
Of course. And that has been the convention, meaning that has been, the unwritten rule. It's not a written rule. So I don't understand why we don't think that. And this is where President Trump is, let Trump be Trump. He doesn't believe that he has to do something just because the other presidents did it that way. If it's not in the law that he has to do something some way, he's more tempted to say, well, I can do that then. It's black and white. Law is black and white. If it's against the law to do something, you can't do it. If it's not written somewhere that he can't fire the chairman of the Federal Reserve, then, well, why can't he do that? He appointed him.
Well, I think your friends Dana Bash and Chuck Todd and others in the Washington establishment have an issue with that. I mean, look, you don't have to watch the shows on Sunday like I do to sit there and see them with their saliva drooling out of their mouths, yearning for impeachment. The panelists on the shows, besides the great Chris Christie, saying that, that the Democrats wouldn't be doing their job if they don't impeach Trump. On what? I have no idea. And another thing, this is why good people don't get into politics.
Oh, of course. Now, not for me to disparage the broadcast industry per se, Kevin, but the ratings for MSNBC, CNN, and of course Fox have never been higher. So this is good programming. These people are saying these things because it is making their ratings go up, right? When your ratings go up, you don't change. So the perverse incentive right now with Trump derangement syndrome is to continue to lay it on, lather it on. So it's very difficult for me to watch. I mean, Chuck Todd I watch to laugh because I think he's literally insane. But if the ratings are good, they are going to froth and froth and froth for impeachment proceedings. But the reality is the legislators, the congressmen and women, are going to have to look and say, we can't follow the lead of the media on here, or we'll ultimately end up looking stupid. So, meet the press and face the nation and what have you. It's got a little difficult for me to watch.
Right. It may be difficult for you to watch, but that still doesn't excuse the fact that they are yearning for the Congress to impeach, and I think that it's going to be too difficult for the Democrats not to go after the president. If they do, contrary to your prediction, is that good for the president? Is that good for the country?
Well, it's not good for the country. I don't think it's. I think it's wrong that we would have to be put through something like this. We look back on when Clinton was impeached, and you wonder, well, was that a good idea at the time?
Oh, I think it was. I worked that story. I think it was. Look, you're the president of the United States. You perjure yourself.
This part, yes. This, of course, it's always the cover-up that's worse than the crime, right? And in that case, what he did made it worse. And if it happened again, and most pundits seem to agree that he probably would have been impeached and removed from office if it was today. But we don't necessarily need to see that if there isn't genuinely something there. If there's no there, what are we going to do? And so I still am very dubious of the idea that impeachment proceedings will get very far at all. I'm dubious.
Well, I'm glad you're dubious. You are Phil Hardy joining us here. Kevin Miller in the morning. KIDO Talk Radio, taking your calls about the issues that matter to you. Spending an hour with Phil Hardy just discussing what's next in Washington. We'll see, but I mean, look, even, coming up, we'll ask you just how concerned should the president be about the Republicans in the Senate. You have Mattis resigning. You have Kelly getting the boot. Mattis, I'm going to stay till February. No, you're going.
He's gone.
Right, he's gone. So don't mess with the boss. More coming up with Phil Hardy. Kevin Miller, you're listening to 107.5 FM, 580 AM, the place to be heard, KIDO Talk Radio. And we continue on with Phil Hardy. He's always has something up his sleeve from Strategies 360. How would you describe your job? You're a lobbyist, is that it?
I'm a federal lobbyist.
Wow.
Yeah. It's
big time.
Is this news to you?
No, I just want to make sure I described you right.
Yeah, you got it perfectly right.
So before we get to the state of Idaho, do the Republicans in the Senate have the president's back?
I think they do. And whether they like it or not, again, this is going back to our two-party system, and we're not a parliamentary system. We can't just replace the prime minister with a vote of no confidence and you still retain control and everything goes on. And that happens all the time in Europe. That's not how our system is set up. Like it or not, Trump ran as a Republican and he won as a Republican. So therefore, the party has to continue to back him. And that means the Senate has to continue to back him. The Senate has an increased majority with the Republicans. The Republicans are going to do well in 2020 in the Senate. That's a done deal. So I think that it's more beneficial to criticize where it's appropriate, but to understand that you're not going to get too far if you don't support him and his overall agenda.
Supporting the president's agenda. Let's go to Idaho.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, it's a brand new day, I mean, it's exciting for everyone who's interested to watch, people who thought that Brad Little was going to be just a third term of Butch Otter. If you look at the men and women that he's hired onto his staff and to run departments, you're not seeing a lot of holdovers there at all. You're seeing very, very few. So it's really a broom that swept out literally everyone from the Otter administration. So it's a new world, and he's going to obviously have his own agenda. He's been very close-lipped on what he's going to do. He's laid out some of his priorities, in his State of the State speech. It's going to be very interesting to see how he works with a legislature that's become increasingly conservative. And there's but
you say that like it's a bad word.
No, but there's just Brad Little has never been considered one of the very conservative members when he was in the Senate. And, it's going to be interesting to see how all of these new members, so many new members in the Idaho legislature as well, how what they actually are like. We don't know. Even what they ran on is very difficult to tell. It's very rural state.
Well, the big question is whether or not the grocery tax is going to be repealed, number one. And number two, the $65 million shortfall.
Yeah. Yes.
And the state paying $150 million for the HP campus.
So here's what my understanding is. The grocery tax, unfortunately, is not going to be repealed this year. I'm very disappointed with that.
Hold on.
What was that for?
The bell tolling for the non-repeal of the grocery tax.
Unfortunately, that's the intel that I'm getting from the members who want to see it gone. They don't think they're going to be able to get it done this year. They hope they'll be able to get it done next year.
Folks, we hear that all the time from those people, don't we?
It's true.
Why do we elect these people, folks? I mean, poor Phil's having a coughing fit. He's that upset about it.
It is upsetting to me.
I sit here and think, why do we trust them? Once again, the great betrayal.
Well, look, Governor Little has actually said if the bill is put before him to repeal the grocery tax, he will sign it.
Sure, but there are ways to make sure that the bill is not put before him. See Butch Otter.
It hopefully will.
Hold on now. Are you going to agree with me on that one or not?
Butch Otter was not in favor of repeal of the grocery tax.
But there are ways of, if it weren't for the Jedi tricks of a few senators, that thing never would have gotten to where it did the last few times.
So I think it's going to come along, and that they're going to socialize the idea that this is going away. And if that's what it has to be, yes. But it's becoming clear that the bigger problem is that the revenues are down for the state, and
how does that happen?
Well, the consensus seems to be that the tax cut that was granted by Congress and signed by the president, in 2017 now, end of 2017, happened so late in the year that companies weren't, and individuals like me and you, weren't ready and didn't change our withholding status. So we're seeing a lot more money in our paycheck, which is good, but some of that is going to be owed to the state. So the state is, and this is bad news for a lot of people come April, they're going to end up having to write a check, to the state of Idaho. And some of these people were used to getting a return,
sure, a refund,
and
but if you don't claim anything, you should be okay.
Well, no, I'm thinking depending on how many dependents you have and whatnot, you may end up having to write a check. So what I'm trying to say is,
I have no dependents.
Listed. The Idaho legislature may not be able to set budgets. So hold
on. Look, I don't mean to be rude.
Oh.
But I just want to make sure that people are listening to 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. We have one of the most insider guys in the state, in the country, telling us that the grocery tax will not be repealed, and telling us that the Idaho legislature doesn't know how to do a budget.
No, it does know how to do a budget.
Apparently not. It's $60 million shortfall.
It's not going to have the information it needs before people send in their tax returns.
Do you have a venture card?
I do not.
You have an Airlines Mile card, right?
I do, yes.
Okay. So I have a venture card. If I were $6 short with the venture card, I don't think they would be that understanding with me. I don't understand how that works.
So what may actually happen is instead of waiting around through April, they can go home and the governor can call a special session by which they can set the budget.
Right. That'll cost even more money.
Not if the alternative is leaving people sitting around for 3 weeks waiting for this information to come in.
Folks, elections matter.
So that is a real issue. I don't think the economy here is slowing. The economy here is doing well. It's just people are probably under-withheld on their tax, and they're going to face a little rude surprise when they have to write a check.
Phil Hardy's full of good news. So
it is bad news.
So no budget, no repeal of the grocery tax. It would be very easy to blame the new administration on this. Not rightfully, but you're the quarterback. You take the blame for these things.
Well, I think that they will.
Although there will be a honeymoon season.
They will be very soon explaining, if they haven't, completely done so already, to their colleagues and how they're going to have to, get people to understand that this is just a blip.
Well, that's easy for the politicians to say it's a blip. Not so much when you have to make payroll or you have to pay the bills. I mean, this is a pretty big deal that no one is reporting right now.
It is being underreported. It's starting to become out there. If you look for it, you're seeing it.
Look, we don't need to publicize anybody else. Remember where you're at there, buddy.
I'm sorry.
You know,
I'm sorry.
We're giving you this exclusive. You're giving this to us, and you're downplaying it. Didn't we talk about this off the air?
It is big news. Yes, it's just I'm surprised it's taken this long for people to understand it.
Well, there's a lot of gratuitous tours of the Idaho Press Club, so maybe they'll wake up soon.
I'm waiting.
Anyway, so we have that. Any significant legislation? I guess.
Of course, Medicaid expansion.
Oh.
We're already in the thick of it.
I could see somewhere in Meridian right now, the publisher of the Gem State Patriot, Tea Party Bob, is just exploding with all this wonderful news you're giving us.
Well, there's going to be a lot of talk about the decision of the court in Texas. Why are we even bothering with this? It's expensive.
How do we pay for it?
How do we pay for it? And the numbers that were generated are really not accurate to what's going to be actually happening. So there's going to be a lot of angst on that, and the legislature is going to put something into place. But for those who think it's an immediate thing, it's going to happen right here in 2019. It's not going to happen in 2019. It's going to go into effect in 2020.
More coming up with Phil Hardy. What's it like when you tell people you're from Idaho in Washington? What do they think?
The vast majority are just sort of bewildered.
Bewildered.
Yeah, because they don't know anything about Idaho. They don't know what it's like, and they often ask, well,
do they know it's a state, not a territory?
They do know it's a state, yeah.
That's good.
But they don't understand any of the topography. I used a nice big word there, Kevin.
It's a tough one.
And, you have to explain how it's like a desert in the south and Alpine Switzerland in the north, and there's all these mountain lakes. And
Afghanistan to train on.
And that some of the best Top Gun training facilities are happening here for our fighter pilots and our A-10 pilots, and it mimics the warfare that we need to conduct on an endless basis, apparently. So, it's they are very surprised and they want to know more about it. I'm sure that happens to people from Montana too.
Montana.
Yeah,
that is
Wyoming.
Yeah, well, Wyoming, yeah, that's our fallback places from here.
Well, I mean, it's different.
Not you; you're more comfortable with those people, but for us, the mountain people, will be withdrawing to Montana or Wyoming.
No, the people of Idaho will stay here.
I see, says the man east of the Great River.
I fly over it too often, Kevin.
More coming up with our great friend Phil Hardy from Strategies 360. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Man, I can't believe the hour has flown by. It's such a treat to have Phil Hardy with us from Strategies 360 on winter break, if you will, getting ready to get back to the grind. When you're in Washington, you're right near the Capitol. What reminds you of Idaho?
Almost nothing, to be honest with you.
Wow.
Yeah, unfortunately, almost nothing. Obviously, where I work and where my office, my home, and the Capitol is a completely urbanized environment.
Your home east of the Great River.
Yes. It's a completely urbanized environment. There's, it's noisy. The people are unspeakably rude. They think their horn is just their way of getting back at everyone or any slight. And, people don't even use their horns in Idaho. That's oh, hey, look, stop, look out. In D.C., people just lay on their horns and just go for it forever. It's a noisy, mostly dirty, just cold, rainy. It's sort of miserable in a lot of ways, Kevin.
Right.
But I do love it.
But it is the nation's capital.
It can be beautiful.
Right.
There's no doubt about that. And you go all to the museums, and the sites are gorgeous, but you don't live on those sites. You don't work on those sites. You don't work in the Washington Monument. You don't live or work inside the Smithsonian, but you do get to walk by them periodically and go inside them to look at things and to fill your soul and recharge your batteries. I think the Library of Congress is one of the best places to do that.
Sure.
It's not really a place that most people think of going, but, I put on my Nicolas Cage persona and get my National Treasure vibe happening, and I go in there and it's just, just a fantastic, amazing, the world's biggest library.
More coming up with Phil Hardy next. You're listening to 107.5 FM, 580 AM. KIDO Talk Radio, traffic and weather together. Good morning, Dave. And thank you, Larry. KIDO Talk Radio. So let's talk a little bit about Russ Fulcher, Congressman Fulcher. Well, it sounds kind of cool to say that, Congressman Russ Fulcher.
Yeah, it's a great thing.
What do you expect from him?
Well, he's going to be a different obviously everyone's different, so he's going to be different than former Congressman Labrador. He won the lottery on office space. He got one of the largest offices available, larger than Congressman Labrador had, larger than most any other freshman congressman will get. So he's already in the plus on that. He's got a good staff.
Well, that's reassuring.
He's got a good. Hey,
that's reassuring for us here.
Actually, it is, because if you are,
this is Washington speak now.
If you're crammed into 5 or 6 people in this tiny little room, it's not the best and most conducive environment to work.
No, it's the life they chose.
It is. But he happened to get one of the bigger ones available.
It's like people that complain about being on the radio. It's the life you choose.
Yeah, well, I do have some respect for the work you do, and
I'm glad you have some, considering how highly we think of you.
But I want to be honest with you, Kevin. The room that we're in right now, in D.C., you would have 8 or 9 people working in this space, and it's just you and me.
Well,
so
it's the life they chose.
It is the life they chose.
Right.
Yes.
It could be here in beautiful Idaho or east of the Great River in the muck.
Well, that's the life some of them chose.
So back to now that we've covered the landscaping issues of his office.
Yes.
So what do you expect from Congressman Fulcher?
Well, I do expect that he's going to work hard at finding a few friends across the aisle that have, and we spoke about this earlier, there are some conservative Democrats, Western Democrats, that will share some of the ideals that are important to Idaho, from wildland firefighting to, timber harvesting.
They haven't gotten much accomplished in the past 100 years, have they?
There are things that do. So this is the unfortunate part of politics these days. There were some actual really important bills that passed with, tremendously wide margins in Congress last year, from the opioid abuse legislation that passed almost unanimously, to sentencing reform, which passed almost, nearly unanimously by congressional standards, overwhelmingly. But the media doesn't talk about that because there was no conflict involved. So that's another one of the parts of...
I think we're getting back to what about Russ Fulcher?
Well, Russ Fulcher is going to find those like-minded people on issues that are important to him, that he might be able to get something to move as part of what the Democrats want to try. But again, it's very hard to get anything passed, so I think that he's going to have to spend his first 2, 4, 6, 8 years building up those relationships, learning how things work. They don't work the same as the Idaho legislature. He's in for big surprises. He already knows that.
Well, from what we've heard, the Idaho legislature doesn't do much work.
That's you talking, not me.
But, right. I think if, it's a results-based business, and not to beat up on anybody personally, but, people run for office, they want to be elected, and now we're hearing the budget's not going to be ready. $60 million over in the fastest-growing state. I mean... what do you want? Us not to hold people accountable?
The people will be held accountable.
Really?
The elected leaders will be.
Do you really hey, but something? It's a new day.
We have a citizen legislature in Idaho. We can't ask these people to sit around without the tools they need to get their job done.
But do we really need them to be there every year? Kind of go back to what was it? Wasn't it one time every 2 years?
Well, some states still are every 2 years. Montana's every 2 years. And a lot of states like Oregon and Washington have 1 year where it's longer and 1 year where it's 60 days. It's short. Utah the same, very short. So
if Utah can do it, why can't we? I like those people.
They have more special sessions,
right?
Kevin.
They can knock it out real quick.
That's probably what would happen in this instance. A 1 or 2 day special session. It's cheaper.
Right.
More efficient.
We still haven't really talked about Russ Fulcher, but we'll move on. Congressman Simpson.
Yes.
Everybody speculates that, for the last, 16 years, this is it for him. What do you think?
Now he's ranking member. He's not the chairman of his subcommittee. The only reason that I consider he would stay on after this term is he has been there long enough. He knows his counterparts very well. He's always treated them with respect. He can probably still be effective, maybe not as effective as he was, obviously, as chairman, but he can still be effective. But there does come a point when you say, I'm in the minority. I don't want to be in the minority anymore. He's been there for 20-something years. I would not hold it against the man an iota if he decided this would be his last term in Congress.
Something to look out for. What about Senator Risch, Senator Crapo?
Well, Senator Risch, obviously chairman of Foreign relations, this is the pinnacle, of the man's career. This is his moment. There's no way he's going to let that go. I think he's there for the foreseeable future. Senator Crapo also seems to really just enjoy being a legislator. He enjoys being there to try to do good without being flashy. So if he was going to leave and make oodles and boodles of money on Wall Street, he's had so many opportunities to do that already.
I just wonder, you go back to the ages, though, and, they must really love it. The travel is tough. It's not like you live in Virginia or east of the Great River. But to really do that when most people their ages are chilling out.
The travel is brutal. It's not uncommon at all for me to be on the same flight as Senator Risch or Senator Crapo out of D.C. to Salt Lake.
Yeah, it's the Salt Lake one, yeah.
So many other members, I see, and it's rough for me. And these guys are significantly older than I am.
Right, but they have staffs and you have you.
They don't have staff on the airplane.
But they schedule the flights.
Sure. I mean, that's not so hard. I mean, you can do it on your phone these days. I do everything on my phone. So,
just saying, Phil.
It's difficult, and I don't think people appropriately, understand how difficult it is. And I do know that they happen to spend more time in D.C. than former Congressman Labrador, who had a young family, would come home virtually every single weekend because he had, young kids.
You keep bringing up Congressman Labrador.
Well,
is there an issue there? We haven't really brought him up, but you keep bringing him up. I mean, are you trying to spin? I mean, we're talking about the new year, the new look, the new everything else,
So getting
Phil.
back to Congressman Fulcher,
by the way,
his kids are grown.
Phil?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's always great.
You're listening to Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.